Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Dan Patrick and the Honorable Kirk Watson.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much in the middle. Senators, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Whatever will we do with ourselves now that we don't have to look at Nate Silver every day? Senator Patrick, I'm going to begin by reading back to you an email that you sent me on October 24th, and you invited me to ask you about it today. This was sent at 1:30 in the morning. I know how much you like your late-night emails.
Yes.
I said it, this is the email to me. I said in early September on the air that Romney would win with 300 electoral votes plus, and had some fun being the official first media outlet to call the race for Romney. That was before the first debate. You can remind me on November 8th if I was right or wrong. I really do think he's going to win by a large electoral margin, but many of the states will be close. What happened?
You need to learn that you can turn that off.
Yeah, I was wondering, did I hit the send button on that?
You did.
You didn't respond. I don't think you
about 10
responded.
o'clock,
I didn't.
When the news comes on, just reach over there and let that be your signal and just turn that
Turn
thing
that off. What happened?
Well, I think I was right in that it was going to be close, and I thought several of the states would be very close, and
they were.
And he would win. And at the end of the day, those states were close. They went the other direction.
Right.
And instead of 300 votes going Romney's way, they went Obama's way. But the nation is obviously very divided. I think there were 3 million votes out of 115 million. And whether Romney had won or now that Obama has won, both men should recognize that the country is divided and that the country is looking for answers and solutions,
right,
and not gridlock, and we need to work our way out of the problems we have, and I hope the president does that.
Senator, you're calling for compromise between the Republicans and Democrats.
I would like to think that Washington would work as well as the Texas Senate works most of the time.
Senator Watson, let me ask the question of you a little bit differently. Did Governor Romney lose or did President Obama win?
First of all, while I agree that there is a need for the compromise and the need for the ability to reach across aisles, I think that's one of the issues and problems. I'm not sure I completely agree with Senator Patrick that it was as close as he says it is. I know that that's a lot of the discussion now is to try to say it was a lot closer, but I think the president won. As opposed, although I think that there were some things that Governor Romney did that helped in that regard. But let me say that this way. If you look at what happened in other elections, say senatorial elections, and who won in some of those U.S. Senate elections, I think that's a sign that President Obama was winning and that it wasn't just about the other side losing. However, I do think that the great debate that seems to be going on in the Republican Party and the division in the Republican Party itself about how it wants to approach things probably hamstrung Governor Romney to some degree. And it made it more difficult for him. Him getting out of the primaries the way he had to put him in a position where I think when you look at some of the outcomes of this last election cycle, it put him in a situation where he was not he was too far to the right in some instances, and I think that cost him.
Senator, in fact, what Senator Watson says is true. On the other hand, much of the Wednesday morning or Thursday morning quarterbacking has not been that Governor Romney was too far to the right, but that he was actually not adequately conservative. That he was really more of a moderate who was masquerading as somebody who was conservative, and that was the reason he lost. I wonder how you feel about that.
I do think he was not my first choice. He wasn't my second choice. But once you go to the general election,
we agree on that too.
You support the team, and the focus is where is Texas, and that's what I'm focused on because we now have a session coming up.
Right.
We have our challenges and our opportunities in Texas. I know where Texas is, and Texas is very conservative.
Right.
Texas elected great Latino members like Mr. Villalba up in Texas, and J.M. Lozano, and Stephanie Carter's coming back, and James White won his primary. So we have brought minorities into our party. We are very conservative on the issues.
Yeah.
We want all the statewide, as we continue to do. So when it comes, the rest of the country may be a little confused. I can't think for other folks, but I know how the people think in Senate District 7. I know how the people think in Texas. And in Texas, they like conservatives governing Texas, and that's why they keep sending us back in large numbers.
And indeed, the bulk of our conversation today will be about that. But I want to ask you quickly about a comment that Senator Watson made on election night at the Democratic Party event, that what is happening nationally in this election with President Obama being reelected will actually impact Texas. As much as Texas believes it can look within its borders, see who was elected, take care of the issues that we care about that affect us, the reality is we can't disconnect completely from the national election. President Obama being reelected, Senator, will impact Texas to some degree.
Well, the Affordable Care Act is going to impact Texas in a very negative way. So that is true now that he's been reelected. But I'm not so much worried about the other 49 states. My focus is on Texas. We're the job creator. We're the economy that's leading the way. If it were not for Texas, America would have no large state to speak of, or mid-sized state, to look to for leadership. The country would be better off if Washington mirrored what we're doing in Texas, in the way we're leading on our conservative philosophy, how we're creating jobs, how we do 4 things in government. We educate, medicate, regulate, and incarcerate. And we have a light hand on regulation. 1,200 people a day are moving to Texas because they see the American dream still alive in Texas and not the other 49 states. They're fleeing from states like California that raise taxes again. They're fleeing from Illinois. People are coming here to Texas because of our low tax, our low regulation, our opportunity to be an entrepreneur. If America looked like Texas, America would be very strong today.
And you think you can hold off what you just feel are the negative consequences of the president's reelection with regard to those things?
I believe Texas will continue to lead, and we're pretty certain of the path that we're traveling down. And
Senator,
it's been very successful.
My sense is that you meant that more positively than Senator Patrick is taking.
Yeah, in fact, I'm kind of having a fuzzy moment listening to that. I really do. Look, I completely agree with Senator Patrick that the role that Texas plays in the country is a very important role. And I agree with him that we should all be very proud of the state. And I am. I mean, I can give you a long old list of why I love this place and why I'm so proud of it. But one of the things that I think is true is everything from the Affordable Care Act to issues related to education and higher education are going to, I think, will be positively impacted by the re-election of the president. I think we're going to continue to have a discussion in this community and in this state about how we want to play a role under the Affordable Care Act. The concept of Medicaid expansion being one example of that. And it's just one example. But all the good that comes from the Affordable Care Act, kids are going to be able to stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26. The folks that have pre-existing conditions that now cannot be denied coverage, those sorts of things. But then when you talk about things like Medicaid expansion, we are a state that, again, we can be proud of our state, we can, and there's reason to be proud of our state, but we can do better. And we can do better in some instances, for example, with regard to health care in this state. We have, depending upon what statistics you look at, either 1 in 5 of us or about 25% of us are uninsured. We have the highest rate of uninsured people in the country. The idea, and we also send a great deal of money to Washington, D.C. that we don't get back, where we could use it right here in our state to benefit our people as opposed to going to Massachusetts or California or someplace like that. The idea that we wouldn't do that with regard to the Medicaid expansion is something where it's 100% for the first couple of years, and then 90% is paid for by your tax dollars that are going to Washington, D.C. that we ought to be getting back. What that would do for health care in our state, what that would do for the economy in our state, are the kinds of things that we ought to be discussing and debating and making sure that we take full advantage of the positive that could come from the re-election of the president and moving forward with the Affordable Care Act.
Senator, I want to let you respond to that. You know that Steve Murdoch, the former state demographer, Michael Klein, both of the Hobby Center at Rice and your home city of Houston, have said, to Senator Watson's point, that if the state were to embrace key aspects of the Affordable Care Act, specifically the expansion of Medicaid, we could insure about 3 million of the 5.8 million uninsured Texans to whom Senator Watson refers. Rebut his point if you wish.
Well, if you look at our budget our budget, if you had a pie chart here, and you drew a line from 12 to 6, cutting the pie chart in half, we spend about half our budget on education K through 16. From the 3 to 6 o'clock on the pie chart is Medicaid, about medical expenses, mostly Medicaid, 25%. 10 years ago it was 10%. It's projected by our state demographers to be 38%, Senator, in another 10 years. It is not sustainable. We cannot afford it. It will put pressure on the dollars we spend in education, which is the most important issue facing our state, I believe, or it will create a dramatic rise in taxes. There were parts of the Affordable Care Act that the Republicans agreed and were willing to compromise with in Washington, but the Democrats would not compromise. They would not address specific problems like children on insurance to a few more years or pre-existing conditions, which the Republicans agreed on. And instead, we have this massive bill that will bankrupt America. And one of the reasons, Senator, we have a lot of uninsured in Texas is because people are fleeing the other 49 states because they can't get a job under the policies of the president and some of the Democrat-led governors like Jerry Brown in California. So they are coming here, and when they come here, they're not coming here because they had a high-paying job. They're coming here because they didn't have a job, and they come here without insurance. So we're inheriting in Texas, and it's going to be our responsibility to take on the task of finding a job for these folks, educating these folks, creating insurance options and medical options for folks who are leaving states that have gotten it wrong. We've gotten it right. People aren't leaving Texas, Evan. They're not leaving Texas, Senator. They're coming to Texas because we, under a conservative leadership, we don't always get it right, but we've gotten it right more than we've gotten it wrong. So we're inheriting a lot of those problems from other states.
Well, and while I disagree with a great deal of the premise there, but let me say something about that. The concept that if all that were true, the concept that what we ought to do then is just say, fine, we're not going to take any of the funding and try to address those problems. Instead, we're just going to declare that they're not really a problem worthy of addressing, isn't the way to solve it. You know, Perryman came out with a report that said...
This is the economist, Ray
Perryman. He came out with a report recently that said not only should we do it, but it would actually be an economic net benefit to have a Medicaid expansion. And I'm not going to sit here and for a minute say that, oh, that's a perfect program. It is a program that needs some reform to it. It is a program that needs work. But simply because it doesn't meet someone's concept of perfection is not a reason to say we're not going to participate at all. Particularly when the failure to participate not only doesn't solve any of the problems that we have of people coming to the state, people being uninsured, it actually works as a net negative to us by not having the Medicaid expansion. So one of the things that I worry about is that we have gotten ourselves in Texas into this position that we have to first start with the idea that if it costs us anything, if we're going to make any dollar investment, by definition, that's wrong. We can't do that. Even if the opportunity cost of not making that investment is greater than making the investment, and even if the net positive is greater over time. I think we're doing that in a variety of things, and this is one of those instances where you get a 9-to-1 match, but goodness gracious, we're not going to make the investment of the one for fear that making that investment by itself is more than we want to do.
We could talk about this all day, and I wish we could. I want to move on, though, to another topic related to the election, and that is that and this relates both nationally and in Texas. What is said to have carried the president over the line is what Ron Brownstein, the great National Journal reporter, called the coalition of the ascendant. Hispanics, African Americans, Asian Americans, young people, gays and lesbians. It was a coalition win as opposed to a broad win for the president. Obviously in Texas, we're particularly interested in at least one of those coalitions, and that is the Latino coalition. Latinos went 71% for President Obama. In the last, I don't know how many elections, only President Clinton in 1996 won a larger share of the Latino population than President Obama did. Governor Romney's percentage was down from Senator McCain's, which was itself down from President Bush's. Senator Patrick, we live in a state that is going to very soon be Hispanic majority. A lot of concern nationally that Republicans are repelling Latinos rather than attracting them. What do you think about that, and how is that different? You mentioned Representative Villalba, Senator Cruz, obviously.
But the numbers on Senator Cruz, I know they're not all in completely, but it indicated that he may have only had about a 35% vote
of the Latino vote. Well, let me ask Senator Patrick.
I think he beat the Democrat pretty soundly.
Yeah.
He did. He won, but when in the specific part of this question and the repelling...
As it relates to Latino specifically.
That's right.
Speak about that, Senator. You represent a city that is among the most, of the big cities. Sure. Houston is quite Hispanic.
Sure. Our party has to continue to connect with the Latino community. I believe their values, pro-life values, pro-family values, great work ethic, match up with our party better. We can do a better job of...
You're generalizing that is generally speaking,
I think the Latino community has more in common with our party than where the Democrats stand. We have to do a better job of laying that out and reaching out to the community. But again, I go back to Ted Cruz, Villalba, J.M. Lozano, Larry Gonzalez a few years ago. It's interesting. Latinos are coming here from around the country, and so they're coming to Texas. And it's one of the reasons that I'm very excited to be chairman of education, because one of the issues we have to solve is we have to solve the dropout rate of Latino male students particularly, as well as African American students in our state who are dropping out in high numbers. We cannot have a successful economy moving forward and a workforce. We don't have the workforce now to meet many of the skilled jobs that are needed that don't necessarily require a 4-year education. And I intend to make sure we do everything we can to reach out to the minority community to be sure they have an opportunity at the Texas of the American dream. And you can't live the dream without a good job, and you can't have a good job without a great education. And we're going to lead on that. And we're going to give Latino families choices and options that they've never had to have a chance at that dream.
Do you worry, Senator, that some perceive the Republican Party as pushing an agenda on whether it's sanctuary cities, voter ID? I've talked to any number of your fellow incoming senators, both new and current, who say that they're ready to kick in-state tuition to the curb. Charles Krauthammer on Fox the other night said that where Governor Romney went wrong was when he got to the right of Rick Perry on in-state tuition in the primary. The question I have is, are you all legislatively doing one thing that goes against the very opportunity-focused rhetoric that you're offering this morning?
I think we've always been opportunity-focused. We've also believed in law and order. Look, the issue has always been, and I represent a lot of Latino business people in Senate District 7. Yeah. Some vote Democrat, some vote Republican. But the Latino community is as concerned as the Anglo community or the African American community about the increase in gang violence. We see many of the gang members who have crossed the border to come into our state. They're concerned about some of those sanctuary city policies. They're concerned about their businesses growing. They're American citizens. And I don't buy into the argument that it's only Anglos who are concerned or Republicans. I think a lot of Democrats are concerned about this issue, and they should be. I was down on the border about a month ago, and in that particular week, we know that two people from Afghanistan and Pakistan crossed our border. The security on the border is not about, we welcome immigrants from all nations and all countries. We want them to come here and live the American dream. But we have real dangerous people that want to come into our state, whether they're part of the drug cartels or they're people from countries of interest around the world. Yeah. And it concerns me, and we need to address that problem. So that securing the border should be looked at as a law and order issue, which I know I would believe the senator would support
not as a
as well.
partisan issue.
Not as a partisan issue.
Well, look for that ought to be, I agree. Securing the border and making sure that we're secure is not a partisan issue. And it is something that we ought to all work hard to do.
Agreed.
And I feel very strongly about that. With that being said, your question is different than that. Your question involves the role that some are playing right now in, I think, in a negative way as it applies to the Latino community. Let's start with the concept of sanctuary cities. You know, you can talk about wanting to have a border that is secure and making sure that we have law and order, and nobody's going to be opposed to that. Everybody's going to be for that. But profiling becomes a real problem. And I think that the legislation that some have been pushing in the legislative sessions related to what gets broadly labeled sanctuary city involves profiling. And Latinos and Hispanics that say we want to have strong law and order, they are. Law and order along with everybody else, they want law and order, but what they don't want is discriminatory profiling. So sanctuary cities...
And no one in our party, Senator, has ever...
Well, except that the bills do that. And I know nobody wants to say that out loud, but that's what the effect of the bills are. So
That's with due respect, that's your view.
And with due respect, I let you talk. So the second thing, you've got the sanctuary cities. You also have voter ID. And the whole concept of voter ID is, in my view, and I've seen it said by somebody before me, is that when the Republican Party can't create that coalition, it's not going to reach out to those people. Here's what we'll do. We'll just make sure they can't vote. And so the voter ID and redistricting, those were also bills that I think show a lack of concern for creating a coalition with the Latino community. And frankly, you don't have to listen to me on that or take my word for it. Take the federal court's word for it. In both of those instances, the federal courts came in and said there was discrimination in those very specific issues. You mentioned in-state tuition, the concept of in-state tuition. That was something that the governor, during his presidential race, strongly defended to his detriment in the Republican Party. He defended it to his detriment. And now what you're hearing is exactly what you just indicated. You've interviewed some people in this forum where they were originally for it, but now they're going to be against it. And I think you will see a strong effort to do away with that, and it will be the Republican Party that will be leading on that. And then from the standpoint of an opportunity, I completely agree that one of the big issues in the Hispanic and Latino community is the opportunity involved with education. But look at what has happened by those in control of the Capitol when it comes to education. Right now, about 40% of the Hispanic population, if I get my numbers right, around a little bit over 40% of the Hispanic population have people, is 25% or older that doesn't have a high school diploma. Whereas in the Anglo community, it's more like 8%. And then if you flip over to the college part of that, it's almost 3 times more Anglos have a college degree than do the Latinos. I think I got that out of something called the Tribune. I don't remember where I got that. So it may not be accurate, but
I'd like to respond. I'd like to respond to that one. I don't want to interrupt, but I don't want you to own the half hour.
Well, all I'm saying is, if we are going to talk about education and that being an opportunity issue, we need to quit cutting the funding for education. We need to, and by the way, when it gets cut, then deny that it was cut. Until you get a pants on fire in the American Statesman, then okay, well maybe it was cut. We got to quit cutting education. We got to provide the resources for that growing population to be able to meet the accountability standards. So I think there is a real problem.
Mr. Chairman, especially in that capacity, respond.
Look, one of the issues in dealing with education is when you talk about Anglos, more are graduating from school, more are going on to college. It's because many Anglos have choice. They have a choice if they have high-paying jobs to send their students to private schools, or they move to the suburbs because they want to move to a school district. They're not moving to get out of downtown or away from their neighbors. They're moving to better schools. But many Latinos, Senator, and many African Americans don't have that choice. And they are trapped in low-performing schools that have always been low-performing, that the Democrats continue to want to have the status quo continue. And you will continue to see Latinos drop out of high school, and you will continue to see the numbers for Latinos going to college to be lower than Anglos if they don't have a choice to escape poor-performing, perennial failing schools. So that's number one. Give those students a choice to get to a better school. You'll see more graduate, and you'll see more go to college.
And Chairman, you intend to make vouchers choice, school choice, in some form, a part of your agenda as Chairman of Public Education?
Choice means a lot of things today, and a lot of people have tried to define what I mean by choice.
Well, then you define it.
When the time comes, I will, and we're working 12 to 15 hours. No, you know, you laugh today, but this is part of a problem in politics today, for Democrats or Republicans, you almost can't think out loud anymore.
That's true.
You can't have a discussion because everything is reported, distorted, refuted before you get out of the blocks. And so I'm not going to fall into the trap here or with any media outlet to lay out a plan today. Within 10 minutes, I'll have 10 new organizations against it. When I'm ready, we'll lay out the plan. But I can assure you this, that it's going to be education through innovation, accountability with flexibility, and the opportunity for every parent. It's a moral right to be able to send your child to the school that best addresses your child's needs. Whether your child is in a low-performing school, whether your child has autism, or whether your child is simply in fear of their life to go to their school. And so, choice in 2012, I look at the word vouchers, that's like rotary telephone. That's yesterday. 10 years ago when we were having that fight, we didn't have charter schools, and we have some bad ones we need to close, like public schools, but we have some great ones. We didn't have online learning 10 years ago. We didn't have blended learning. There are lots of opportunities now, and if we make more choice available, we'll have more competition, we'll have better schools, and we'll have more successful students, black, white, and brown.
We only have a few minutes. I'm sorry to not let you respond on that, but I want to ask about the Texas election. Yes, you seem mortally wounded, actually, on that. I want to ask about the Texas elections because I do think there's something to say, even though as much as the national election was exciting, there was no real big surprise in Texas. There were a couple of elections that maybe turned out different than the way people thought, but basically we're at 95-55 in the House. Republicans are not in a supermajority position, but they still can do anything they want without a single Democratic vote. Democrats can't prevent anything on their own. In the Senate, exactly the same, 1912. In Congress, maybe Pete Gallego beating Kiko Canseco is about the only interesting or revelatory thing that happened on Election Day. And then, of course,
I would say Senator
take
Davis.
issue with that?
Well,
No, I mentioned Senator Davis. I mean, I think Senator Davis, the 1912 part in the Senate is the same, but Senator Davis beating Dr. Shelton, Representative Shelton, is a big deal in terms of the numbers of the Senate. But I also want to ask you what you think it means in terms of the politics of the moment.
And that's really where I'm.
Senator Watson first, and then Senator.
And I'm glad you bring that up because I think, yeah, it's interesting that we can still do the math and everybody can count, to 19 and 12 on their fingers. But I think where it's very interesting is in the politics of the state. In part because that district, when Senator Davis, quote, won, when the effort was made to draw a district that would beat her, and she, quote, won and was able to get back to another district. What people sometimes forget is the district she got back was basically a Republican district.
President Obama lost that district in the last election when she won.
That's right. It was a straight heads up Democrat versus Republican, and so it was a microcosm of one of the few microcosms we had about when you have two good candidates, two well-funded candidates, and the ability to have a debate on the issues, what issues win. And I think the fact that Senator Davis was successful reveals some of what we've been talking about here. I mean, the issues that were important in that were issues related to public education and how we're going to deal with public education and whether it's going to be something that we're going to, I would say more fundamentally, one of the issues is we need to make sure that we don't have the failing schools. And we need to be putting money into supporting those schools.
It's always the money. It's always the money. Money is not the answer to every problem, Senator.
I don't disagree with that. But when we have a situation where we have failing schools, at some point I think it's important to hold the members of the legislature accountable. If you want an accountability standard, let's have an accountability standard for members of the legislature that we have these failing schools and not just simply say, let's give up on them. But having said that, I think that was part of that discussion and that debate. I think issues related to women's health were a very important part of the debate in that district. So from a pure public policy / political standpoint, I think it was a real microcosm of how people feel in the state right now. And and I'm pleased Senator Davis prevailed.
Senator, this time as well, President Obama lost Tarrant County, in fact, lost by a more significant margin than he did last time. Senator Davis was running against somebody else from Fort Worth, which was not the case last time, and there was no libertarian in the race this time to take votes away, and yet somehow she still prevailed.
Yeah, she is very smart. She's a top-notch campaigner, and she won the race. Representative Shelton, again, I thank you for saying he was a quality opponent as well. Taking on an incumbent is always not the easiest job, and he won the vast majority of all the precincts, but he lost some precincts 97-3. And it's hard to overcome that in a close race. But let me say this. You can talk about that race. Let's talk about there are 19 out of 31 senators who are Republican.
So what is the material?
There are 95 House members. Every state elected official was a Republican. The Democrats weren't even coming close.
But talk about the Senate,
and the
Senator,
US Senate.
because of the 19 Republicans, you have a number of new senators.
Great new...
Hancock, Paxton, Campbell, Taylor, Schwertner, who are quite conservative, more conservative than the people who they are replacing. And so what will the material effect on the Senate be of that?
This goes back to what I was saying earlier, and I think Senator Watson will recognize this. When I came into the Senate in 2007, there were maybe 2 or 3 what I would call rock-solid conservatives, and now there are about 12 or 13. And in the House, we set 78 freshmen and sophomores, all conservatives, all grassroots people. The people of Texas are very clear in where they want us to lead. Yeah. It's not just Republicans, it's conservative Republicans winning primaries overwhelmingly. We are a conservative state, and we have an obligation to represent the people who elected us. And in the issue of education, Senator, I'm willing to join you and do whatever it takes to give people an opportunity to succeed. But I need the Democrats also to join me and not draw a line in the sand that money is the only thing that's going to turn a school around. If a student is in a failing school through no fault of their own, we have 8,000 campuses in Texas. Almost 500 campuses are rated unacceptable. It should be unacceptable to every Republican, every Democrat in the state, every voter in the state, to say to a child, you're going to succeed even though we're forcing you to go to a failing school.
Well,
and I hope, will you join me in that?
Well, I'll join. I'll wait to see your plan, I guess.
I'll call you early.
Well, good. Here's the thing, or one of the things on that is that we ought to all be working together to make sure our schools succeed.
Yes.
But what you've taken, at least publicly, is your position. And granted, I agree with you that it's too bad we can't think out loud anymore. But what I don't agree with you on is the idea that the way you've characterized your position, and that is that what you want to do is play to just your base.
No, I don't.
Well, you've said that publicly. You've said our base has wanted this is going to be the voter ID bill. This is going to, and I think that one of the things that is true about that
even your base supported voter ID in the polling, by the way. Even the majority of Democrat voters supported voter ID, Senator.
Well, I haven't seen that.
But you mentioned a lot of polls here. I can show you a lot of polls where 72% of all Texans thought voter ID.
Let me finish my thought.
Sorry for interrupting.
That's all right. I've started getting used to it. Here's the deal. You have said you want to play to your base. And you talk about the districts and who won in what districts. Redistricting created, in my view, a damaging thing. Because one of the things that redistricting did is it created the opportunity for some people to ignore anything but the very hard base. And I don't think most of Texas believes in some of these issues the way your very hard base might do. Of course, I don't know what is the base of the Republican Party now, those who voted for Senator-elect Cruz in the runoff, because that base is about the size of Lubbock and Williamson counties combined. And if what we're doing is we're going to legislate to a very narrow base, you're going to have trouble. You're not only going to have trouble with Democrats, you're going to have trouble with Republicans that recognize that good public policy may not be policy written by the margins of either party. And so I've been troubled that you have at least publicly said that your idea of vouchers is our base has wanted this. I think
I've
we've
been
got
talking about school choice, Senator.
Well, okay. Your concept of school choice, I guess we all will get to see that at some point and see what that really is. But you've narrowly tailored it to what your base wants.
No, that's a mischaracterization of what I have said is that a major Republican issue for a long time was voter ID. It was sonogram. A number of those issues that were supported, and sonogram was supported with bipartisan support. 3 Democrats. I couldn't have passed it without Democrats in the Senate passing it. So it wasn't a partisan-only issue. And I don't think the opportunities to reform our education, K through 12, is going to be. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. It hasn't been in other states. And so I asked the Democrats, I'm a good listener, and we work very well together. You know, we have some fun here, but Senator Watson and I are personal friends. We respect each other. We were on the same side on an issue with something that's going to happen next week in Austin about how it was funded. We both didn't think public money should go into that issue, right? We stood on the floor together, which I appreciated. And if you have a question about redistricting, if you want some more Republicans in your district, if you want a 50-50 district, and we redraw the maps, just let us know how many you'd like. I'm happy to help.
You have been very generous. Thank you.
They love him in Bastrop.
I am gonna let the
They do, as a matter of
I
fact.
know they do. He's a nice guy. I told him he's a nice guy.
I'm landing the plane safely right here. A lot more we could be talking about.
It may be upside down as we
But
come
it's at
in.
least safe.
Yeah.
We'll invite your questions in a second. Please join me in thanking and welcoming Senator Patrick. Thank you.
Good job.